hard time. I'm doing hard time. I'm doing hard time. I'm doing hard time. Hard time. Doing hard time. Hard time. Hard time.
We are also doing hard time.
Penitentiary, jail, prison, call it the way you want. Yes, they are extremely dangerous for correctional officers to work in. I would say the old days, I would say about 10, 15 years ago, the danger that we were exposed to were probably hostage taking, riots, assault on staff, but the assault on staff would be a combination during the process of, let's say, the riot or the hostage taking. Now the danger that we see the most is inmate will arm themselves with a homemade device, shank, pick, which at one point in the past they used to have those, but it was not very common. We used to find them, but not at the rate that we're finding them now, at the alarming rate that we're finding them now. What I mean by homemade device is, first and foremost, a shank or pick or knives made by an inmate can be made out of anything. They are very creative in the design. What I have here is one in the process of been finalized. This one is not finalized. A, it does not have the traditional grip that the inmate makes on them, and B, this one was not sharpened enough on the edge. So that one was probably discovered on an inmate or in the cell of an inmate, and the inmate itself was in the process of making these knives. Here's we see a similar type of knives, but this one I would say is more finished than the other one, than the previous one. You see that the edge here has been sharpened on both sides. It has more design of a knife, and then here you see that they put a grip on. And that grip, this one, the light blue part here is made of a section of the inmate towel that the penitentiary provides them with. And the rope here that ties the towel onto the knife is a portion of the inmate blanket that we provide them. It's kind of a knitted blanket. And at night, they take great pride and patience to undo the blanket, to use the rope for anything. So this one is a bit more finished than the other one. I would say that one, it would be finished. That would do a lot of damage on a person. The traditional shank or shiv or knives that we used to find used to be made of metal. Any piece of metal that the inmate could get their hands on, they would sharpen the edge. Here they use Scotch tape, regular Scotch tape, just to make the grip, and then on top of that they added the rope. During the assault on the opponent, that the inmate that is doing the assault, in case that he would lose his knife, then the knife would fall there and then he can grab it again and carry on the assault. Instead, that if he doesn't have the rope, then the knife would fall on the ground, and there's strong chances that the opponent may grab the knife and use it on the person that's been assaulting him. So this is another type. Here we see another one made out of metal, and here we have some kind of medical tape wrapped around, and again, the famous rope, to make sure that it stays the property of the one that is doing the assault or using it. Here's a tubular one that they flatten the tube to make it flat, and then they make it sharpened at the end to use it to do the entry, to make the puncture wound here. The favorite one of the inmate, and which is, like I said, it's made of anything. Here you have a regular toothbrush that you found in every household in Canada or inside the jail. This is a regular toothbrush that was given to an inmate. This is an institutional toothbrush because of the color. And we provide the inmate with those every day or every week. And then what they done with it is they melted a broken razor blade on each side. And there again, the razor blade that you see there, that's probably from a Bic razor that we provide again to the inmate. They extracted the blade from the Bic, snapped the blade in half, and melted the blade on each side. Again, we provide the Bic, we provide the toothbrush, and we provide the matches for them to smoke inside. So you see that in every cells, like the elements to make the shiv or the shank or the weapon. I can assure you that, I don't know if you ever extracted a blade from a Bic, but those blades are very flexible and they're very sharp. One slice on the jugular, or maybe one on each side, you're going down. You're game over. This one here would seem like normal. If you had it in your pocket like this, you would believe, you have a tendency to believe, well, this is a comb. It's a standard handle of a comb. The only exception is you're missing the other part that goes here to comb your hair. And when an inmate has this like this, could probably puncture your jugular vein in the heartbeat again. Once you puncture there, you're going down, and your chance of recovery is very slim on that. This is one difficulty that we have inside the institution is we found a lot of weapons at an alarming rate. The rate of violence inside the institution in the last while, I would say in the last 5 to 6 years, like assault on inmate, inmate on inmate, assault on staff, verbal assault on staff has increased dramatically. What we want is that correctional officers be issued with a stab-proof vest, which is some type of garment that protects the vast majority of your body, and we want that to wear that type of equipment under our uniform shirts. And I have a sample here just to show you what it looks like. It's some type of garment. The outerwear is made out of cotton, which you normally wear that under your shirt. And so for personal hygiene, that could be washed in the machine, and it goes like this. So you put that under your shirt. But what protects us is what goes inside of it. It's an insert made out of Kevlar, and it goes inside of this, and it goes in, and you wear that around your body. Another danger that correctional officers are exposed on a daily basis is infectious disease. When I mean about that, I'm talking about AIDS, which is a major one for us. And then you got hepatitis A, B, and C. And on top of that, you have tuberculosis. What Corrections Canada is telling us is that 15% of the inmate population are infected with one of all of those. So it is extremely difficult for correctional officers in the environment that we work to know that you might be exposed to that with the inmate you're dealing with during a verbal or physical altercation with the inmate, or during just an inmate fight, two inmates fighting, one against the other, and the officers has to intervene to separate them. In case of body fluid contact, yes, we do have what we call the PEP protocol, post-exposure protocol, where an inmate had the body fluid exchange with an officer, then the officers undergo that protocol, which is not very nice. The side effects of that are atrocious, and then you undergo on that protocol for 6 months. It creates a lot of difficulty within the couple of the officers in question, i.e. Sexual relations or just regular contact with his child or their child and the spouse. It is extremely difficult for the couple in questions. When there is a critical incident within an institution, let's say a riot or even worse, a hostage taken. We had one in 1990 that I want to share with you, and I also have the permission of the officers involved. We had a case here in the Quebec region in Port-Cartier Institution, which is a maximum security institution, whereas a group of inmates took hostage an officer and another inmate. During the 30-some hours that ordeal went on, the officers were tortured. The inmate in question was tortured and killed, and what they done to that officers, I do not wish to share that with you here on camera today. But the bottom line is based on the traumatic experience that officer suffers, he was unable to return to work as a correctional officer. And based on all the act that governs us, public servant, and especially correctional officers under the PSSRA, it seems that an officer after 2 years was abandoned to himself. The government of Canada, the Correctional Service of Canada, failed to relocate that officer within another department. It seems that after 2 years he was thrown away like a dirty rag. And that officer put his life in danger to protect society, protect Canadians on a daily basis when he went to work. And that type of situation, we have a lot of them. And it is clear to us correctional officers that the government of Canada abandoned us. The Correctional Service of Canada abandoned us. It is clear that we have to find a way to make sure that when a situation arises within an institution, critical incident, that we take care of those people that are protecting Canadians on a daily basis.
Hello, my name is Pierre Mallette. I've been a correctional officer at Donnacona Institution for 18 years. Let me tell you, it's not exactly a relaxing occupation. Myself, I applied to the Correctional Service in 1985. At the time, I was working at a golf course in the summer and on a ski hill in the winter, so it was seasonal work. Finally, a friend of mine came up to tell me that they were opening a penitentiary at Donnacona in the county of Portneuf. At the time, I thought, pretty much like everybody else, you know, I had seen films on prisons, and then I thought it was a pretty rough, tough milieu, you know, completely closed. When I entered the Correctional Service in 1986, at that time, we had a training of 8 weeks at the college, but they taught me then that the inmate was an enemy. They also taught me how to shoot, how to use chemical agents. They taught me also how to not be a victim of manipulation. I would say at that time that it was a training that was centered more on security than on the programs they have today. You'll recall that in Quebec during the 1990s we had a big biker war between two criminal groups, the Rock Machine and the Hells Angels. That forced Quebec to develop a new strategy to deal with these groups inside penitentiaries that other provinces, I wouldn't say, really have yet. I think they're starting to have these kinds of problems with criminal groups. You'll also recall at the time that there was a provincial correctional officer that was killed as a result of a conspiracy by these criminal groups. That led to a new dynamic in the penitentiaries. It led to a new policy on criminal groups. We could criticize it greatly, but at the same time it led to a new awareness on the part of our employer. I can tell you also that on the union side of things, this evolution led to a permanent point on the agenda in our regular meetings with the employer, where we look at exactly what is happening in the milieu of organized crime. And I'll tell you that really changed the dynamic in our penitentiaries. Where I work at Donnacona, it's a maximum security institution. You know, when an inmate ends up at a maximum security institution, it's pretty much the end of the line. At Donnacona Institution, we can have a lot of problem cases amongst the inmates that can't function in either medium or minimum security institutions. It's almost like in a class that if you have students that pose problems for the teacher, we put them all in a single class just for them. From 1986 to about 1993, Donnacona was a new institution, and we had a lot of very, very serious incidents. Sometimes it was necessary to use firearms. And at one time, an inmate was fired upon, and he died. At the time, we had correctional officers that were patrolling in the exercise yard of the inmates. One inmate, for whatever reason, took up a baseball bat and started beating on these 3 agents. Of the 3 of them, 2 of them managed to leave that area. The other officer was still in the yard. The inmate continued to chase these 2 other officers to try to continue beating them with the baseball bat. The officer in the tower had no choice but to begin shooting. The officer started shooting warning shots lower and lower until the officers were forced to fall to the ground. And the inmate came to hit the officer with the baseball bat one more time, and at that time the officer fired on the inmate, and it was a fatal shot. He was killed. At that point, I was at the control post, and the problem was that we had about 120 inmates in the yard outside. The officers that were outside, they managed to get into a safe zone where the inmates couldn't go. But the problem is we still had a large crowd of inmates out in the yard, and an inmate had just been killed. It led to a situation, to say the least, that was very problematic. The inmates started shouting, screaming, all kinds of things, and it could have led to a riot. It could have led to anything, really. At that time, there was a group of officers that gathered inside the building and began admitting inmates one by one. We succeeded in getting the inmates inside, but my post at that time, that night, was actually not right there. It was in the building L, and so I left for the building L. And at that time, we didn't have the equipment that we have today. We didn't have the same methods to verify inmates. We didn't have electric doors. The inmates just walked anywhere they wanted from common room to common room. So there was a whole crowd of inmates there, and they were looking at us, I have to say, with complete and utter hate. Total hate. Among these inmates were friends of the fellow who had been killed outside. It was total hate. The next morning, we start all over again. The next morning, we start over. And I'll tell you, back then, there was no aid for employees, no help for employees. You have to develop your own emotional shell. There was nothing to look after your psychological needs. But, years later, here in 2004, I can remember just the smallest details of that event. At the Correctional College, they don't teach us stuff like that. And could they? I don't think so. As correctional officers, we decided ourselves to create our own union. It's a young union. It's only 3 years old. It's kind of a newborn in the union movement. And I have to say that it's not always been easy. We're kind of like the black sheep that left the big family of the Public Service Alliance of Canada. For the employer, the Treasury Board, the employer is looking at us a little bit suspiciously. There's a lot of resistance to change things as they relate to correctional officers. The employer doesn't want to recognize that correctional officers have different needs that are different from other public servants, and we're not trying to diminish other public servants, it's just that it's different. Unfortunately, what the public understands about correctional officers is generally what they've seen in old films or films where the bad guy is the correctional officer. These are the kinds of myths that we want to break. We want to break them forever. I'd say that during the evolution of the correctional service over the years, that the service has opened to the public media access to inmates so that the public can understand what the inmate is. But as far as correctional officers are concerned, I'd have to say the employer doesn't seem very interested in explaining to the public just what role a correctional officer plays.
I work at Atlantic Institution in Renews, and I've been there 14 years in February. We were just getting ready to go do a yard walk, and then they had heard over the radio that there was a fight in Unit 1. So we were the first to respond, actually the first to step onto the landing. And when we got there was nobody around. Usually when you say there's a fight, there's still commotion going on. There's still inmates running here and there. There could be slamming of the barriers, just trying to get things calmed down. But it was just everything was completely quiet. There was nobody around other than myself was laying on the ground in a pool of blood. And I thought it was a deer carcass. And I know it would never happen because how would they get it over the fence? But still, I couldn't understand how it got up on the range. It looked like a deer that had been completely skinned. And when the other officer come out of the unit, that was working in the unit, come out of the office and he said, I just realized and I said, this is an inmate. I couldn't believe. So we were putting our gloves on while we were doing this. It only took seconds. Walked up maybe 4 steps and onto the landing where he was. And he was laying face down, or stomach down with his head turned a bit. He had one hand, his right hand was underneath of him. So we couldn't see where the blood was coming from because it was a mass, it was as big as a kitchen table, the blood was. He wasn't moving at all, like you couldn't see his back rise and that where he would be breathing. So we immediately said, well, I thought, let's turn him over, it's gotta be underneath. It looked like he had grabbed himself, before he fell. And sure enough, when we turned him over, he had several stab wounds on him, so we immediately loaded him on the stretcher, run him down to healthcare. And Al Plaxton and myself were the first two. We did the CPR. The nurse was doing the air, the breathing, and Al did the chest compressions. And the air wasn't going through. I noticed it was coming out the side, like under his armpits and stuff. And my job was more or less to cover the ones under his arm and to cover the ones up in here. He had one up over in his hollow of his neck. It was definitely dramatic. Like it was nothing I'd seen before. He was naked, but you couldn't even tell that he was. He looked like he was wearing a Spider-Man costume. In his eyes, in his earlobes, I can remember just standing and you kind of gaze over while we were sitting awake while they were doing the CPR. I was just kind of in my own little world at the time. it was amazing how every bit of him, in between his fingers, it was just smooth. It wasn't like wet blood. It looked like they had rolled him in it and dried him, or they had painted him. He was that red. That's a big thing that stands out in my mind. Like, when I go to the psychiatrist and talk to him, that's one of the main things. For some reason, it was different. It was more cruel. Nobody was concerned. Lots of other times, we've had inmates even come and help carry the inmate down to the health care with us, or want to help, and at least 1, 2, maybe even the whole range is concerned. We've had inmates that have hung themselves, slashed themselves. They've all been concerned as if they're going to make it through, overdose, whatever. Nobody was concerned with this. It was just like they'd thrown out garbage. That's what it was like to me. It just looked like, and that's when you realize, although he's an inmate and he's in for murder and he's not one of my favorite inmates, like I didn't have a really good rapport with him, it still hit home just to think that that's still a human being, and they just left him there just like garbage. And I think that's when when it was all over, it never bothered me while I was doing any of the responding to it, and that took about an hour or so later, and that's when it hit me, like, how bad this really was. It could have been any of us. Anyone that you meet new that might say, doesn't it bother you? And it never has. I said, and then after I always say, well, no, I've never been scared to go to work. Back in your mind, you start to think, well, it must be somewhere, because you're always cautious. You're always on guard, but you don't think about it. Now, like, I would walk down through the aisle of, if they're going up to rec, I'd be walking from Unit 3 up to the rec yard, out to aggregate area, and could be the only one in the hallway with maybe 80 of them at a time from a unit, and not think twice. You might joke with one of them, laugh, and you don't even think about where you are. It's no different than being in a mall, or because it's so, but I think that's what it is. You get so complacent with the place that you get, it's just like home to me. It was a second home, and I spend so much time there that it was just second nature. Now, it's totally different. My feelings of the whole place, I don't think of it the same right now, and it'll just take time. A lot more paranoid. That's why I take the Paxil, and that is a lot for paranoia, and you're real cautious of everybody. Dark, I don't go past dark, in the dark by myself. Before, I never really give a second glance to anyone. Now, I'll see somebody just in front at the mall. I mean, it's a pretty quiet place. Somebody with a lot of tattoos and stuff, and you're always taking a second glance. You're always making sure my back's at the table if I'm eating somewhere. So I'm really cautious, like they're real paranoid, and that's not me. Even to the point that my own girls are even starting to pick up on it. They can tell, like, they've never been scared of the dark, but now they're starting to get more of it. Well, if my mother's scared, then there's got to be something. It took me a long time even to be able to go out in my yard and feed the dog. It took me almost this whole 2 months just to get, and that could be like 6 o'clock at night, but it gets dark. I couldn't go out. It bothered me that bad. I was scared there was something around and I've worked through that. Now it's mostly, some things will flash back. Like, I was at McDonald's and I was certain that I had seen Winder, which was really, I know, impossible. But I was at McDonald's. I had to stop right in the line while I was paying and take an Ativan because I was going into full panic attack. A little more edgy too. Like, I can get quite agitated easy now. They're still human beings, and our job is to serve and protect. A lot of people they don't see that. They think that we go in and so one of them dies, big deal. That's part of our job. Our job is to serve and protect the public, as well as to serve and protect the inmate. And a lot of them don't understand. Some people really that are close to me know that, oh, I wouldn't want to be doing that. But there's still a few out there that think, oh, that's not a big, why would that bother you? It was just an inmate. They still don't, unless you're in there to see that type of environment, that it's not something that anyone can just, it took me a long time to realize every day was something new. When I put my uniform on, it gives me a whole different attitude. Like I told you yesterday, it's almost like Superman. You just knowing what you do, I don't know, I like my job, I always have. It's where I wanted to be, and I've been there now 14 years and plan on retiring there. But it should stand more out to other people, so that at least I've been asked if I worked at the Irvin. I've been putting gas in at the Irvin. I've been asked to put their gas in. It's like, no, I don't work at the Irvin. Burn security. I've stopped at the mall in Fredericton, and they thought I was working for burn security. Little things like that. Now, how often do you ever go up to a police officer and ask them something like where the washrooms are in the mall or something foolish, you know? I like wearing my uniform. Like I said, I'm not ashamed of it in any way. There's a lot of people say, oh, it's just a job. It's just a job. To me, it's not. It's a career. I went there. I took 2 years of school for it. And
officers have asked us for quite a while now. They want the Canadian public to see what they are. They want to see the real image of what they are. They want to show that they are professionals in what they are doing. As police officers or firefighters, they are professionals. And the second thing is we're negotiating a contract right now. We've been negotiating for 3 years with the Canadian government. We've had 80 negotiation sessions with the Canadian government, and we have not settled half of what we have to settle in our bargaining. So one of the second objective of this campaign is to let the Canadian public know that we are also in negotiations and that we need better working conditions. One of the important topics is training. We want to be involved in the training programs that have to be put forward to help the correctional officers to be better professionals at all times, especially regarding organized crime. We want to be able to better identify who they are, how they work, how they operate outside and inside. And this kind of material, this kind of information is available in CSC, and we want these information to be given to correctional officers. This is going to facilitate our job when we know who we are confronted with, how they work, how they operate, who's leading the organized group inside the institutions. This is the kind of training we need. We need a regular training on use of force, because when we have to intervene in different situations, if our training is up to date, if we are with the new ways of intervening are shown to us, this training is given to us, it's going to be better, less injuries for inmates, less injuries for correctional officers. Second thing we're trying to negotiate right now is to be involved in how to better our work. We want to be able to discuss, since we are frontline, we are the frontline people. Correctional officers are there. Correctional officers are a little bit like nurses in a hospital. We support the institution. We're there. We're the backbone of the institution. So we want to be able to discuss with our employer, the Canadian government, how to better the job. Not necessarily the working conditions, but the job. How to make our job better, how to make our jobs more professional, to help the inmates, because the part of our job is also to help the inmates make it through their life sentence or their sentence that they have. The third thing that we are actually trying to negotiate is a leave with pay for pregnant correctional officers. Actually, there's close to 25% of the correctional officers that are females, and we feel that when they are pregnant, they should be put on leave with pay to protect themselves and the child to be born. Then there's another important topic, is the working schedules. Actually, we are working on 7-3-7-4 work schedules. This means 7 days of work, 3 days off, 7 days of work, 4 days off. We work days, evenings, and the graveyard shift. And this means that we don't have a very good social life. We have a lot of difficulties in having a good family life because of the working schedule. These schedules are archaic schedules. They don't exist anymore, 7-3-7-4. Normally there are different working schedules that have better, that will give your family and yourself a better quality of life, and this is where we want to get into. We want to make sure that our correctional officers are able to live a better life, instead of being off once in a while or working 7 consecutive days in a jail, in an institution, is not small stuff. Health and safety is a very big important topic also. Our members need to protect their health and their safety, and we have to have tools to do that. We would like to be able to wear protective vests, where we would not be, if an inmate would try to stab a correctional officer, then there would be some kind of protection. We want to be able to make sure that if we are stabbed by an inmate, or if we are bitten or scratched by an inmate and there's any exchanges of body fluids, we want to be able to know if that inmate has HIV, because HIV is very high in the institution. So we want to know if the inmate has hepatitis A, B, and C. That is also very important right now in the institution. Tuberculosis is starting again in our institutions. So we want to be able to have all that information regarding those facts, to be able to protect ourselves and to be treated in the hospitals if we are in any kind of situation where there are exchanges of body fluids. And I think one of the crucial demands that the correctional officers have right now is a better pension. Actually, we're allowed to retire at the age of 50 after 25 years of service with 50% of our salary. And this is where we would like to maintain the 50 years of age, 25 years of service, but we would like to retire with 70% of our revenue. Actually, correctional officers are not necessarily leaving after 25 years of service because the revenue is insufficient for them to retire. So they have to work more years. And that is where we feel it is more difficult for correctional officers. They'll work 28, 29, 30, 31, 32 years before they even think of retiring because they don't have enough money to retire. So yes, if this program is put in place, there will be more correctional officers retiring after 25 years of service. Correctional officers are doing hard time. They're working inside the institutions. They're living the same conditions as the inmates. And they have to, most of the time, they'll have to work longer than an inmate that will have a life sentence that will do 25 years. And we're living under those same conditions every day of our lives. Even when we're outside, we're still living those same conditions. We can compare our conditions to police forces, where there are some police forces that have already gotten what we are asking for regarding pension. So we're not the first ones asking for something like that. At the federal level, sure, we're the only people, or we're the only public servants that work under these conditions, so we feel that we need different conditions. Our working conditions are different, and we need different benefits to be able to do our job and to go through our life as a professional in corrections. Correctional officers are human beings like anybody else, and they have feelings, and they live these conditions like the inmates live them. So probably that it won't all go away, but if we are able to get better working schedules, better working environment, earlier retirement, all these little bits and pieces put together should be helpful for correctional officers.
My perception of corrections was kind of Hollywood. You know, I served 14 years in the military service, and I was thinking that, well, I'm going to become a prison guard. The inmates are going to be working for me. I'm going to be sitting on my horse with my shotgun. There was an old guard who was a veteran of the Second World War, Mr. Richard, a very, very good man. He sat me down. He sat down with me because I had also done military service. And he told me, Charles, I'm going to tell you something. I've been watching you do your work, and you can say that you're a military veteran, that you've done many years in the military, but here, this is another world. Don't play with the heads of the inmates. Don't tell them lies. Tell them yes or no, and these people here will respect you. I've had a lot of situations in my career. I've been assaulted about 5 times in my career. I've been punched in the head. None that put me on the ground, but there were a couple times when I've been kicked in the face. One time I thought I had my neck broken. There was a dangerous man there who was in for murder. He was at the canteen. Myself, at the time, I was at the central post in the dome area, as they call it. He was at the canteen. He was there to ask for a piece of gum, a piece of bubble gum. The inmate that was running the canteen, I knew him very well. He was a Quebecer. So he gave him a gum because the other inmate, he didn't have any money. About 5 or 6 minutes later, this inmate at the canteen came to see me. He says, yeah, this guy came and asked me for another gum, and I refused him. Then he brought out a knife about this long, and he came to stab me in the throat. I backed up just in time, and my friend who was with me went running after that guy. He took with him an iron pipe about 3 feet long, you know, a pipe that they do their weights with. There were no weights on it. They just took the iron pipe, solid iron. So this other guy tried to escape. He tried to save himself. He came right in behind me, inside my post. He was running really fast. You often see them running. But he came right in behind me, and I was like, what are you doing? So the other guy, he arrives with the iron pipe, and he says, "Get out of the way, Charlie. Get out of the way, because I'm going to kill this goddamn prick." And myself, I was standing at the time there, and I said, "Wait a minute, you're not killing anybody here right now." And he said, look out, he's got a knife." So I said to the other guy, "Hand it over, give me the knife." So I'm like that. Wow, wait a minute here. The other guy's, "Get out of the way, I'm going to kill him." So I'm trapped between these two guys. And I said, "Look, you're not killing anybody here. You know, I could have saved my own life. I could have gotten out of there and let them just have at it. But, you know, from the corner of my eye, I saw my friend in the other post. He had a gun. And it was aimed in my direction at the guy with the iron pipe. So anyways, I'm trapped between these two guys. I take the radio and I say, as soon as I took the radio, I noticed that in the dome, all the inmates had come around and surrounded. Let me tell you, that was a little bit stressful. So I take the radio and I say, "Officer needs help." So right away, bang, all my coworkers came running. There's one that jumped on the guy with the iron pipe, and I backed up and I asked the other guy, "Okay, hand it over, give me the knife." And it was that long, a pick, an iron pick about this big and very pointed on the end. He wanted to kill the other inmate just for a bubble gum. The majority of inmates, they come from poor families, disadvantaged families. I think I only ever knew one inmate that came from a rich family in my whole career. The rest of the time, you know, these are people who, you know, were abused, but they never learned their lesson. They never figured out that after they got caught by the police a couple times that, you know, I've got to stop doing this. Instead, no, they graduated into federal prison. You know, myself, I would have learned my lesson. But, you know, I often spoke to inmates, and I told them, "You're losing your life here. What are you doing with your life in here?" And they said, "You know, I know, Charlie, but, you know, I can't stop. You know, problems with drugs, or I've been a thief." The best rest I ever had is when I retired. I sleep very well ever since I retired from Dorchester. But before, you know, you think it's normal that you don't get your rest. You know, in 23 years of working there, there's always something that's going on. Even as a medium, you know, you're in contact with those inmates, and stuff is going on. You think about that the next day. You take it home with you. My wife works there as well, and she's still living it constantly. If there's nothing that happens during many days, I mean, if you work in an office where you're not in contact with inmates, well, you know, that's not so bad. But when you're in contact with inmates, that's something else. You're the person that stops them from breaking the law. These are people who break the law. They're antisocial people because they break the laws. They don't believe in them. So we're the people who stop them from doing that. We're the people who organize them. We're the people who tell them when to go to bed. And we're the people.
My name is Mike Long. I'm a correctional officer at Kingston Penitentiary. I've worked behind bars for the last 12 years. Well, I actually wanted to be a police officer at first. The limited choices at the time led me in the direction of corrections. I thought the fields were related, and thought I'd give it a shot. I've seen a lot of similarities with regards to policing and corrections, that basically your streets are a lot smaller, but the people are still the same. You're still dealing with people. I like to think of us as all equals. It doesn't matter if I've got 25 years in, if I'm of a different rank. Everybody's word is valuable. Information is power inside of an institution. It's not just important that I have the information alone, it's important that I share it with those I work with. At times it can be a very rough place. Any sort of institution is routine in nature. I guess having to deal with that in any human aspect, doing the same thing over and over again, that can become, I guess, a breaking point at certain times. For staff, they get bored. For inmates that see that boredom and complacency and try to take advantage of. So it's the hardest part is trying to keep everything new and fresh and coming in with that attitude. I work in a sort of a new unit. We call it a high needs unit. Kingston Penitentiary is basically a protective custody, maximum security institution. We have a lot of high-profile offenders. That being said, some of these will not be able to integrate in the general population, and it's not necessary to keep them in the tighter, segregated part of the institution. So there's a little more freedom in this high needs unit. That being said, every day in the institution is basically the same. All inmates are entitled to, they'll get fed 3 meals a day, they're entitled to showers and an exercise period of time. Other than that, we have scheduled visits to the hospital to see doctors and nurses. There's times where the inmate has made a special purchase outside the institution and is taken to a different area to collect that. We're not as rigid as a segregation unit where we have to escort every inmate with 2 officers. We're a lot more flexible. It's just that we're trying to integrate these people back into a prison open population. So they might need some encouragement with regards to general everyday skills that most of us take for granted, and some of them are just looking to just another way to pass some quiet time. I treat inmates, treat them all the same, fairly. You want something from me, I understand that because of your limited mobility. I expect certain things from you that are set out from the institution and the CSC. You realize that I will hold you accountable for your actions, and you can also hold me accountable for what I say and do with you. So there's that give and take on both sides. If an inmate makes an allegation, it's usually followed up by an immediate supervisor, and then even goes beyond that. If it gets outside to the point of it may warrant the police to come in and question you. Whereas if you make an allegation against an inmate, it's part of your job. It's part of your job. So this is that frustrating part there where you just try to go along your day, make sure it's just a routine from whatever it is, 7 to 3, 3 to 11, and at the end of that day, there's no allegations against you or you making any against anybody else, and that would be it. There's a lot of frustration in the job at times. I guess it wouldn't matter what you do. I think the best thing is having people that you can share your frustrations with and find that you're not alone in that, and to sort of develop a routine where you can get rid of that frustration and leave it somewhere else. I have gone through a divorce recently, and my wife didn't understand what I did at times, and it's really hard for a lot of people to understand unless you're in the profession. It really is. I like to ride my bike. It gives you that time, fresh air. It's something some people can run. I like running too, but I guess the bike is a way of taking you a greater distance away from where you usually are. So it's one way of just letting things go, using that physical energy. That's an important part. So, some people, like I said, run, hike. There's a lot of people in corrections do a lot of outdoor activities, and mine just happens to be riding a bike. I'm proud of the job I do. I try to instill in people that don't worry about what other people are doing, worry about what you're doing. Take the adage that if somebody was looking over your shoulder every time, are you doing what you're supposed to be doing? Are you doing it professionally? Don't rely on somebody else to tell you what to do.
All those who think that we only have a muscle job and not a brain job, well, that's completely false. Many times in our job, I've seen that a person that can't just use his strength has to use his judgment, his abilities of a communicator, his ability to be negotiating with the inmate, to forestall dramatic incidents. All these things are part of our job. In order to manage the penitentiary, in order to manage situations of crisis, there's also a lot of mind control, manipulation that goes on the part of the inmates in the institution. It's not easy either to work 7-day shifts. Like at Donnacona, we do 7 days in a row. And often you arrive at work, and the confrontation starts as soon as you arrive at work. As soon as you start your shift, that's when you have to make sure the inmates are served their morning meals. And that's when the insults start. All kinds of things, all kinds of crude words. And you're going to live that kind of situation for 7 days in a row. All kinds of crude words are going to be used, threats, death threats, things like, I'm going to kill you, you effing pig. That's exactly the way the job goes. You know, it's not like a boutique in a shopping mall where you arrive in a store and you say, well, I'd like to return the merchandise, madame. And it's all very polite. And those are not the kinds of exchanges you're going to have in the correctional service. It's going to be very tough, and it could go right up to death threats. Today we're going to be using a lot more of a negotiating kind of system. When I started in 1986, things were a lot different than they are today. For instance, when we go do cell extractions, back in 1986, it wasn't very complicated. The supervisor told you, go get the inmate out of the cell. So we went there, several of us, and we said, get out of the cell. And if he refused, we intervened. There was no technique. There was no preventive measures. There was really no negotiation. It was simply that you had to win. That was the only choice. In 2004, we can say that the technique has evolved a lot. Right now, before we do cell extractions, everything is filmed completely. Before the intervention is begun, we explain to the camera what is going to be done, how it's going to be done, and who is going to participate in the intervention. After that, we go in front of the cell of the inmate and we explain to the inmate what is going to happen. All the while, everything is filmed. And we give the inmate the choice either to cooperate or that we have to use the necessary force. You know, in the correctional world, you have to have a very good sense of leadership. You have to build yourself an emotional shell in order to live through the confrontations that are very much part of the job. Violent, verbal confrontations. If you have to settle a situation where there are death threats, physical threats against you, threats against your family, that they're going to kill your family, the weapons that you have against that are your word, your leadership, and your shell. You know, it's important that you're able to live with these kind of situations, that you deal with them, and then you move on. Back in 1986, when I entered the correctional service, we had training at the college that lasted 8 weeks. You know, techniques for self-defense on weapons, firearms, chemical agents. I felt that I was at the end of a certain era. They didn't talk very much about rehabilitation, social reintegration, or these kinds of things. And one of the things that I say that really marks the evolution of the correctional service is the arrival of women as correctional officers. You know, women in the correctional milieu has kind of forced the inmate to negotiate more. It wasn't anymore a situation, kind of a macho thing. Now when you have an inmate that weighs 250 pounds, is 6 foot 3 inches tall, and he's confronted with a woman who's only 5'2" or something like that, weighs half of what he does, his co-inmates might look at him a little funny or laugh at him if he tries to confront her physically. It wouldn't be very good for his image. So that has introduced another dynamic to the correctional service. It brought new methods rather than just the traditional wrestling match.
I'm Henry LeBlanc. I work as a correctional officer at SACC-CSN in Prince Albert. I work as a CX2. Been there about 5 years now. Yeah, it's definitely a tough job to work there. Living out in the country like this there really makes a big difference because you can get away from the everyday hassles of the job, of the pressures, of the stress, and you come out here and you can relax. You sit back, you have a look at the countryside, you do your work out here. You don't have to worry, you can leave your doors unlocked in your vehicles, your house, so on and so forth. It's just peaceful to get away.
It was a big wake-up call. Like, you know, you walk into the pen, and the first thing that ever hit me, and we always hear that big door slamming. Well, the first time I ever heard the big door slam, it was reality. The stuff that they taught me 5 years ago, they don't give you any new upgrading. They don't give you any new training. What they taught you 5 years ago, it's gone. It's finished. I would say there's probably 70% of us that are not retrained. So there are some CX2s that have been there for maybe even 10 years that haven't been retrained. Well, if you haven't handled a weapon in 10 years, and you have a riot, and something happens, anybody can probably pick up a gun and start to shoot if you have to. Okay, that's fine. But if you do something wrong, and you shot that inmate, or you shot somebody else by accident, whatever the case may be, and you haven't been retrained, who's going to get in trouble for that? Is it going to be the managers? Is it going to be CSC in general? Or is it going to be that CX officer that pulled the trigger? That's the sad part. People don't have a clue of what our job is. People don't have a clue what inmates are like. People don't have a clue how a penitentiary's run. They really don't. You know, half mangled bodies that are full of blood and everything else out of a corner after they beat the living crap out of each other. You can't pay me $50 an hour to work in that job. You're going to have to pay me a couple $1,000s an hour to work that job, because it just doesn't pay enough. You know, when you're finding dead bodies in cells and hanging inmates off of bars and everything else there, there's not enough money in that paycheck. So I start at 6:45 and I work till 6:45. So I don't have breakfast with my kids, I don't have dinner with my kids, and I don't have supper with my kids. I come home, supper's finished. Dad, how was your day? I basically tuck him into bed. Good night. Read him a story and it's finished. The other 12-hour shift that I work is the 11 in the morning to 11 at night shift. And then we also have a midnight shift. Now the midnight shift starts from 7 evenings to 7 in the morning. Well, that one totally turns your life upside down, completely. I'm proud in the sense that I keep society safe. You know, I mean, we have physical barriers that keep inmates in. We have physical walls. Like Sask-Pen has 30-foot walls. But it's what people do on the inside that keeps those inmates from going crazy or berserk, whatever word you want to use. But it keeps them socialized, it keeps them busy, and it keeps them sane. If you had physical walls that just kept those guys in there, how long would that last? Not very long.
The prison on our shoulders. It's a term that can be used by correctional officers many times, in that there will be times where you're a correctional officer first. You'll be a psychologist, you'll be a nurse, you will be a police investigator. All these things are put on the shoulders of a correctional at any given time throughout his daily or weekly or even career. And at times that weight is bared alone by the correctional officer. In the most part, you don't receive recognition for any of the positive that's done on your part or your coworkers. You seem to get questioned whenever anything negative happens. You may be fine, you may be doing the job well, and the same job over and over. But when something goes wrong, somebody wants to usually use somebody, being that correctional officer, as a scapegoat as to the problem, rather than having the individual being the inmate responsible for their own actions. But I work for the people, the correctional officers I work side by side with. I work with my supervisors, the warden, deputy warden of an institution, the Solicitor General, Commissioner of Corrections, all the way up to the Prime Minister and every citizen of Canada. I represent all those people every day when I go to work to uphold the rules, regulations, and laws of Canada. And that sometimes when I'm asked now to not, because of somebody's discretion, then that makes it hard on you. So it's like every day I don't make that decision, it has to go to somebody else. But in the same instance, they want you to take care of every problem at the lowest possible level. So it's a contradiction at times. You're trying to do your job and you are following it out, but today may be a different day because somebody has a different agenda. There's just so much interaction between staff and inmates that a lot of times it's there's just not enough there's just not enough staff around, supervisory staff to teach on a first-hand basis. Yes, that was correct. Job well done, or we can improve in this area. There's just not enough of that. It's this is the way it is. Something went wrong here, and everybody's to learn from it, not to say, okay, this is what I would like for you. I'll show you how it's done, and here it is. It's more of a trial and error, and usually most times, again, you're not going to receive the positive feedback. That's usually from coworkers. You're going to receive it negative, and in the same instance, whenever anything you're hearing from management is negative, then you get your backup that, I really don't want to hear from you anymore. I'll go in there, do my job, and if I don't hear anything, well, then that's a good thing for me. Correctional officers need professional recognition in the same part that a police officer on the street, or a firefighter, or a first aid provider, or emergency first responder would. Because we are all of those at different times, carrying those jobs within basically any institutional setting. It is basically a city within the confines of the city that institution is in. So we do all of those, in addition to our regular job, we do all those at times, and individual jobs of those. So we're no different than all these people that receive that recognition. The only difference is that they're in the public eye and we are not.
Human beings like everyone else. That means to me that just because of where we work in an institution, we are not the institution. We still have families and friends and are involved in our communities like everybody else is. I work in segregation, and I see confrontation almost every time I'm there, every day. Whether it's name calling, people throwing things at you, people getting into your face, not liking what you say to them, when they're questioning your authority. I feel personally threatened often. I mean, I was assaulted twice in March, badly, and now I find that when I got hot water thrown on me in March, and now I find when the inmates are served a hot drink, I'm more leery of, okay, watch out what that inmate's going to do with that hot drink, that he's not going to throw it on me. So I'm more leery all the time now. I think you learn all the time about being careful and being cautious. And the minute you let your guard down, that's when something's going to happen to you. The offenders seem to have more rights than we do, and we find that really difficult. And I think that reflects on us as professionals. Where I work is that if an inmate makes an allegation against you, they will investigate it to no end. But when you come to them because an inmate's giving you grief, it's kind of pushed aside. When I came here, I was naive enough to believe that the people I worked for would stand behind me, but they don't. So I'm much more cynical of them now. Family life is very important, and I wish we had a better schedule that would accommodate that better. Because I find when I work 3 weekends out of a month, I don't have the time for my kids. And I really miss that. I think I have a heightened state of awareness around me at home. I'm aware of that my doors are locked, and even though even during the day, in the middle of the day, my doors are all locked. And I think that's a state of fear. I think I have a fear of someone stealing my children. Is that any different than anybody else? I don't know. Maybe I'm more aware of it now because of where I work. My biggest fear as a mother is for my kids, and I think when I'm dealing with these people all the time, that I become more aware of what they're capable of. And that's scary, that people are so capable of such horrible things.
My name is Ken Ferguson. I am a CO2 at William Head Institution. My job is not an easy job. I like to do my fly fishing. I like to do my marine work with my boat, and those are some of the things that I really enjoy. This is a unique part of the country. There's no other place that I know that is like it. We have a moderate climate year-round. If you're an outdoors person, there's many things you can do. There's hiking, there's biking. In the summertime, there's swimming. If you're a golfer, golf year-round. It's just a really good place to be if you enjoy outdoor activity. And for me, I really enjoy that. So this is where I was born, this is where I was raised, and I don't imagine I really want to go anyplace else. This is my home. I suppose each institution has its own challenges, but a minimum is by no stretch of the imagination an easy place to work. There's things that are inherent in the job. You're working with people who are in our facility because they've run afoul of the law. We also have, we are like any other institution, we work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and that means shift work. Shift work can be really tiring. It can be something that really wears on your family life. Whether you're a minimum, medium, or maximum, it makes no difference. We all do shift work, it's all hard. We still deal with difficult people, whether they're medium, maximum, or minimum. It can be difficult. It is a different world than a maximum, I understand that, but we still have our stresses and we still have our difficulties as well. It's not an easy place to be at times.
We are also doing hard time.